Good evening. We're going to get started now, so if I can ask everyone to please take your seats. Welcome to the All in the Family program, co-sponsored by the Bethel Men's Club and Jewish Historical Society of Greater Hartford. I'm Dave Diamond. I'm co-president of the Men's Club, and I'm also on the programming committee and board of the Jewish Historical Society. And it's really been my privilege to work with both groups in helping to coordinate this program today. You know, there are so many Jewish-owned small businesses in the area, and so many have been around for multiple generations. And we are delighted to have three gentlemen who will be speaking about their businesses, which combined have been in the area for over 200 years. A long time. You know, we had a long list of businesses. It was hard to, you know, kind of narrow it down for our first program on the history of these businesses. So it'll be a very good program. I'm going to turn the mic over to Steve Rabb, who's also co-president of the Men's Club.
Thank you, Dave, and welcome everyone to Bethel, especially to the Jewish Historical Society members. I'm just going to take a second and just review some of the Men's Club programs that we have coming up over the next couple of months. We have a very active Men's Club. On February 4th, on Sunday, we'll be participating in the FJMC Worldwide Wrap to Fill-In program, which will be followed by a breakfast and a Sulam program, which is our school. On Sunday, March 4th, we've got a breakfast program, and we'll be packaging yellow candles for the Yom HaShoah Remembrance Day. On April 2nd, we've got a breakfast program with a speaker, Glenn Rosenfeld, who is a member of Bethel and a physician who went to Haiti on a mission of help. He's going to talk about his experience. May 6th, we're going to have a field trip. We're going to be going to the JCC and have a breakfast and basketball tournament at Jonathan's Green. And on Thursday, May 10th, we'll have our annual Men's Club dinner sponsored by the Miller family. So those are our upcoming programs. Thank you. And back to you, Dave, or should I introduce you?
It's 20 seconds.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Lance Goldberg. I'm the Vice President of the Jewish Historical Society. Thanks, everybody, for coming tonight. This is a wonderful crowd. We're very excited and want to thank our friends at Bethel and the Bethel Men's Club for helping us to put on this tonight. This is just a fantastic partnership we have. For those of you new to the Historical Society, we just recently celebrated our 45th anniversary. The Historical Society is dedicated to preserving the history of the Jewish community in Greater Hartford through our archives, education outreach, and sponsoring events like this, in which we showcase the struggles and triumphs of our community. Please join us for our upcoming events. We have a storytelling showcase with Matthew Dix about growing up in 1970s, 1980s, on Thursday, April 26th. And if you'd like to participate as a speaker, really anybody of all ages, to be doing a storytelling workshop to prepare for that night, that's March 4th. We have a scribing history event, Holocaust Torah restoration at the Farmington Valley Jewish Congregation on February 7th. We have Family History Day on March 25th. Back to Brooklyn bus tour on Sunday, April 22nd. And finally, we hope to schedule another business program in the spring. That's our hope. Many of you know our Executive Director, Estelle Kafer. Estelle, where are you? And she is near our registration table. Please see her during the evening. If you have a suggestion for a local business owner you know who might be interested in participating. And Estelle, thank you, as always, for helping us to organize tonight's program. And everyone, please consider, if you're not already, becoming a member of the Historical Society and help us continue telling all of our stories and sharing the history of this wonderful community that we all call home. Make sure to see us for more information before you leave tonight. Now about tonight. Over these past 45 years, the Historical Society has done incredible work researching and publishing memorable books about being Jewish and growing up in Hartford, among other great books that we've done. In our research, we were struck by how many longtime locally owned Jewish businesses are here that we've enjoyed patronizing over the years. So we decided to put together this program to celebrate our history and hearing these stories about the places we've been going to for our entire lives. This is also the first of what we hope will be becoming a recurring program to celebrate more locally owned Jewish businesses. We're lucky to have an incredible panel of distinguished local business owners joining us tonight. And I'll have you guys stay in your seats, but I want to acknowledge you, and you guys will come up as you guys present. We have Howard Weiner, who will present first. He's the owner of Woodland Auto Body on Burnside Avenue in East Hartford. Next we have Harry Davidson, who is the owner of Pine Davidson Printing Company on Weston Street in Hartford. And we have Mike Wolf, who is the owner of Bloomfield Bicycle and Repair Shop, as well as Simsbury Cellar Bikes in Bloomfield and in Simsbury. So we're delighted for our guests. Thank you for coming and helping us tonight and telling your stories. The format for tonight will be that each of our guests will speak about their businesses, and we have some slides set up that'll help tell their story. And then we'll take questions afterwards. And in thinking about the questions that you might ask, well, we're also asking that you hold off. If you guys have stories about your local family business, like a lot of us do, talk to Estelle. We want you to come for another night. We want to have another program. So hold off on those kind of comments and questions, but think about the questions you want to ask our presenters tonight. So let's get this exciting evening started. Howard will speak first. Thank you again for coming tonight and supporting the preservation and history of our community. Howard, thank you. Stand here, or do you want the roving mic? Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Lance. Thank you. Everybody, thank you, Jewish Historical Society. Thank you, Bethel. Thank you, all of my customers that are here. In the past year, I hate to say that I've seen many of you, and had a chance to schmooze in my office. But probably the best conversation I had was with Josh Asia. Where's Josh? Stand up. Josh is our youngest member here tonight. If you get a chance to talk to him, you're very lucky. As my friend Cindy Chazen used to say, I printed my words in large font so you could hear me better. Woodland Truck Painting was founded in 1924 in the Burnside Avenue Woodland section of East Hartford. It's always been out there. People think that we're from Woodland Street in Hartford. No, we've always been in East Hartford. Solon Weiner got started. That's my dad. Solon got started in the auto business in about 1937. He had an uncle, A.I. Katz, and I think it was Abe, and a cousin, Sidney, that were in the automobile business. They had Katz Auto Body on Goodman Place in Hartford. I have no idea where that is or was. Solon was not qualified to do very much, but he was a great gopher. And after school, he would perform errands for them. He graduated high school in 1939, and he's proud to say he was at the bottom of his class. He had no other alternatives, so he went to work for his uncle and his cousin. It went okay. He did menial stuff, and he had a good time meeting people. The war broke out. He was sent to the European theater, and he had a very mediocre career in the military, highlighted by the fact that he got hit by shrapnel in his leg. And it was right about the time where everybody was going to the Battle of the Bulge, and he understood that that was not someplace he wanted to go. He would wake up at midnight and walk on his foot to make sure it would bleed. His whole company went to the Battle of the Bulge, got wiped out, and Solon ended up in the motor pool where he learned a trade. So it worked out the best for everybody. When he came home, he expected a ticker tape parade. He walked into Katz Auto Body, and his uncle handed him the keys and said, "I haven't had a vacation in 2 years, it's all yours, bye." He walked out the door, and that's where he really learned the business. After a couple of years, he realized his uncle came back, his older cousin Sidney came back, and he realized he wasn't going anywhere. So he and his younger cousin, Georgie, anybody know George? Shorty Katz? I don't know why they called him Shorty. He wasn't particularly short, and he wasn't particularly tall. Sometimes they call short people, tall. Had a wonderful orange handlebar mustache. He was a fun guy. He and Solon went over to East Hartford and they bought Al Redmere's Woodland Truck Painting Company. Lasted about a year. Not sure why the partnership lasted. Solon said George didn't want to work. George said Solon didn't know what he was doing. For the sake of the Jewish Historical Society, I can tell you that George Katz moved his business to the corner of Farmington Avenue and Prospect Avenue in Hartford, in a little garage sandwiched between Friedman floor covering and the Sunoco station on the corner. And for years he ran a little and made enough money to do what he needed to do. Solon continued with the truck painting business, expanded it, and ultimately painted probably 75% of all the oil trucks in southern New England. It was a great business. There weren't too many people that did it, and Solon figured out his little niche. Everything was fine until the oil embargo in 1973, at which point there was no product coming into the United States. The large oil companies decided there was no reason for them to paint their distributors' trucks, so they stopped painting trucks. Overnight, Solon lost 50% of his business. Followed a couple of weeks later by Pratt & Whitney, who was probably 25% of his business, announcing that they had to get into affirmative action, and they needed to find some minority businesses, and there weren't too many that produced jet engines, but there were a few that did auto body work, so that was the end of that. So within about a two-month period, Solon lost 75% of his business. He had to start over. He didn't quite know what to do. But Solon was a wonderful guy. He didn't know a lot, but he knew what he didn't know. And he knew that he needed to get some professional help. And he turned to, his doctor was Norman Mann, who took good care of him. In spite of, Solon had a couple of heart attacks and a couple of bypass surgeries, but Norman was there and hovered over him. He made a friendship with Al Rosenthal, and I'm not sure where that friendship came from, but Al and Yudi helped him get going with his business. They changed the name to Woodland Auto Body. Marshall came a little bit later. Nice to have you, Marshall. And I never understood. They used to go to see, my father used to go to the accountants every Friday afternoon. And I couldn't quite understand. It never made sense to me. Because accountants are right up there. They're, what do they call accountants? Actuaries without the sense of humor. And then I found out that Yudi had a cabinet where he was, every Friday afternoon was gin gimlets. Going to the accountant was fun, but Al and Yudi took really good care of Solon, and they taught him how to do business, how to keep books, and they put him on the right track. The third thing, Solon didn't have any money, didn't have any clients. So one of Al and Yudi's clients, a little oil company called Mercury Oil, Harry Goldfarb, they still had plenty of painting to do, and they said to my father, we're going to give you a year's worth of the painting money up front. And you'll paint the trucks in the summer, but you need help, and we're here to help you. And Solon was forever indebted to Harry Goldfarb. It was really sick. Solon also met a lovely gentleman from Brooklyn who came here to run an advertising agency, Harry Schachter. And Harry had an idea that radio was the place to advertise. Solon understood that Hartford people didn't go over the mountain or across the river. So somehow he had to get customers to come to him, or Harry convinced him that he had to go to the customers. So Solon made acquaintance with Bob Steele, WTIC, Brad Davis at DRC, but the real key was a gentleman by the name of Jay Strauss, Uncle Jay, who had a small radio show in Manchester on WINF. And you say, how can he compete with Brad Davis and Bob Steele? Well, he came up with the best advertising campaign that Woodland ever had. And he made up a big diploma from Carr University, and he called Solon the doctor of auto body repair, DABR. And he convinced them to tell everybody, and on the radio they said, you got to go see the doctor, because the doctor knows what he's doing. Solon didn't quite know what he was doing, but he went to Norm and he says, you got an old stethoscope? And Norm said, yeah, I got a bill from him. And he went to his friend Ralph Seltzer at the Crown. He says, you got a butcher's coat? It looks like a lab coat. Gave him a butcher's coat, and Solon for about 5 years walked around in a butcher's coat with his stethoscope. And that's where he got his business, and that's how he convinced people that he knew what he was doing. He was the doctor of auto body repairs. To this day, I still have people come in and ask to come see the doctor. I was minding my own business. I graduated from Hobart College with a degree in economics. I got a great job at Connecticut College. I was the assistant dean of admissions. I was hired to have the school go co-ed. It was my job to get guys to apply. The unknown truth about that is the best thing that I ever did there is I increased the Jewish population from 7% to 15%. It's a little known figure that I've never talked about before, and nobody there realized that I was doing it. But that is probably the proudest moment that I had when we finally reached 15% Jewish population. I was making $12,250 a year, but I was saving $5,000 a year because I was eating all my meals on campus, and I had campus housing for $20 a month. But I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. Solon made me a deal I couldn't refuse, and he wanted me to come in and work with him rather than for him. In fact, he wanted to work for me. So the two of us started together in 1977, and first day I was there, noted sage Mark Abrams came into my office, and he said, you can't let your father retire. Jewish businessman can't retire. He needs to have a desk and a telephone. He needs to go have breakfast with his buddies and say, I have to go to work. And son of a gun, a couple of years after I was there, here's my father. He'd come in at 10 o'clock, he'd sit at his desk, he'd read the paper, and he'd try and find a lunch date and a golf game. And he didn't work, but he told people he had to go to work. Then they started going to Florida. My mother would call every couple of months, say, call your father, tell him you need him. Call my father, I'd say, I need you. He'd say, okay, I'll be on a plane. The next morning he was there. He came up for a week, never did a damn thing. But he felt like he was needed, and we had a pretty good partnership. Together, using old-fashioned Yiddishkeit, we grew the business. Now, there's not a lot written in the Torah about running an auto body repair shop, but it does teach you how to treat your fellow man. And we like to think that we had a little tzedakah, a little tikkun olam, a little gemilut chasadim. We did the right things, and people trusted us. And part of our success has been that people trusted us in a business where people don't trust anybody. I have probably the largest Rolodex of garage codes, and people say, yeah, take my car. Which leads me, everybody wants to hear stories. I have two great stories. The first one involved, I don't usually give names, but it involves, I got a call from Lou Green. Lou's a lawyer in town. He said, I had a little accident. Somebody hit me the other day. I'm leaving Sunday to go out of town. Do me a favor, I'm gonna leave my new Mercedes in my garage. Leave the garage door open, the key will be in the center console, pick it up, call the guy, get the money, fix it, and bring it back. Okay, no big deal. I didn't remember where Lou Green lived, and I knew he just moved to Bloomfield. So I said to my able assistant, Patty, who really needs credit for everything that I do, because she makes it happen. I said, Patty, give me a ride to Lou Green's house. She's where you live. I said, I don't know, I think he lives at Schuyler in Bloomfield. I said, okay, so we go to Bloomfield, we drive up Schuyler Lane, we take a left, and son of a gun, there in the first house is a brand new white Mercedes. Go in, the keys are in the center console, take it home, no problem. A couple hours later, we're going to the movies, and Patty says, go ahead, I'll be outside in a minute. So So I go outside and I'm looking at this car and trying to find the damage. Can't find it. Walked around again, I can't find it. I said, you know, let me look in the glove compartment. I pull out the registration, and of course it belonged to Harold and Selma Maffei. We're not the kindest people when they're not happy. I realized I had a problem, didn't know what to do. I figured all else fails, tell the truth. I picked up the phone, hoping for Harold. I got Selma. I said, Selma, and they were customers of mine. And I said, I got a problem, I stole your car. Selma, what are you talking about? Hold on. I could hear her put the phone down, I could hear the garage door open, I could hear her come back and say, you did! She says, well, it better have every ounce of gas in it, and you better bring it back right now. I said, okay. So I went to the corner, got $5 worth of gas, took it to their house, walked up the street, and sure enough, there was Lou Green's Mercedes. A funnier story for me, but not necessarily for other people. One day I was fixing a car for a lovely gentleman named Leonard Holtz from the Hebrew Funeral Association. And Leonard had a big Sprinter van, and somebody had hit him. It was not his fault. And I got a rental car for him. We made arrangements. I got done fixing the car, and I called him up and said, it's done. He said, do me a favor. Can you bring it to your house, and I'll swap cars with you? I said, sure, no problem. I bring the car home. 4 o'clock, Leonard comes in. He says, all right, I have this platform I got to move. I got this. I got the gurney. I got blah, blah. He says, give me an hour. Just go inside and do something. Come back in an hour. Okay, so I go inside. About 45 minutes later, I hear her shrieking, and I look in the driveway, and there's Patty driving up as Leonard has the gurney, and he's transferring it, walking up my driveway. Anyway, we had some bumps and bruises. I do have a few pictures that I want to show. And when I went through, I realized how many pictures I have of old Jewish businesses that are not in business anymore. This is an original picture right after the name was changed to Woodland Auto Body. The Amico station was where my office is now. And Harry Fisher owned a little mobile business. Next. State vending, Abe Glassman. Anybody know Abe Glassman? He's still a state marshal to this day. Does a wonderful job. Had a great business. Next. Park Trucking, the Rothstein boys on Park Avenue in East Hartford. Next. S. Vogel Sons, Elizabeth Park brand food products. There's Mark Tollefson, Frank Davis, King Coil Mattress. D&L. Next. Where's Buddy Jason? Jason Soda Systems. There's my cousin Milty Bear, Kenwood Ice Cream. The Blotners Mechanic Uniform Service. The Fines, Jimmy, Mike, Mel Fine, Acme Auto Supply. Peter Roth, Barney's Business Interior. Anybody remember Peter? Goldberg Brothers, Laurel Beef. The Leopold's Union Meat Company. The Stalls, Gustav Fisher. Bobby Halpern. Anybody remember Bobby Halpern? TLC ended up, conglomeration, they ended up buying Automatic Comfort from Louis Sheketoff. Anybody remember Automatic Louis? Sure. Next. Capital Tire Ballads. Next. Irwin Singer, the other Irwin Singer. Wonderful, wonderful friend of my father's in the Kiwanis Club with him. Next. His manager went on to buy General Oil from Harold Rubin. Anybody remember Harold Rubin? And they ran a very successful business. The Lasso boys from Manchester. Deitches and Kasdan Fuel. Billy Deitch and my father ran the cemetery committee at the Emmanuel for about 20 years together. Billy Deitch was a good friend. And there's an old mercury oil from the Goldfarbs. We're done. Anyway, I thank, as I said, I thank my customers and my friends for being here. I thank Bethel, Jewish Historical Society, Patty, and thanks to all the lousy drivers out there.
Thank you, Howard, for starting us off. Those were tremendous stories. Thank you so much. So let's keep it going, and let's invite Harry up to talk about Pine Davidson. Harry Davidson.
Thank you. As you heard, I'm Harry Davidson. I'm presently the CEO of Pine Davidson Company Printers. I joined the company 63 years ago in 1954 after I got out through naval service, active service during the Korean War. By the way, as an aside, I stayed on in the reserves until 1973 and retired as a captain. Now the notes I have here about our business basically were written by my father, who was very much interested in Roots. How many remember Roots, a television show with Hunter Kinte and whatever that followed all the roots of the family? Well, I have a list here only because I cannot remember the names of my great-grandfather, who was Chaim Davidson, my father, Herman Davidson, and then the two of us that are here tonight, myself and my son, Dan. So we have 5 generations of printing. Let's go back now to Russia and a town called Kishinev. I'm sure nobody knows where it is because I had to look it up, but it's there. And you know, we live in a world which we can't fathom, at least I can't fathom what a pogrom is. But after my father left, thank goodness, in 1903 and 1905, there were pogroms there. People came through town and shot up all the Jews. All right, at any rate, my grandfather lived there before that. I'm sorry, my great-grandfather, this is where I get screwed up. Okay, he was a bookbinder, and he lived, as I said, in Kishinev, and he was summoned to Moscow by the Tsar because he was an exceptional bookbinder, and he was put to work in the palace library there, and this, of course, was a great distinction for a Jew. The thing that I don't understand is, today, if I want to call you and ask you to, from Moscow, 450 miles away, it takes about a nanosecond for me to pick up the phone and call you. I have no idea how they got a hold of him, and I have only a slight idea of how he got there. Of course, in Europe, they have 3-tier transportation. They have first class, second class, and third or fourth class, or boxcar, or whatever it is. At any rate, when he made several trips, but when my grandfather, when he was 14 or 15, he went with his father to Moscow. And there's a little bit of family history with that one too. However they got there, and I'm not sure what that was, but I imagine it's third-class train. There's no heat in those things, and my grandfather froze his foot. And for the rest of his life, in his right foot, he had a very sensitive heel. Well, at my grandfather's age of 16, he left with his father to go to the United States. And there's no mention of his mother, so I don't know where she was. But he didn't get there. He got to Manchester, England for a year. And during that time, his father died. So now, Moses was alone, and he got a ship to Ellis Island, but there was no one to sponsor his entrance. He had the great sum of $50 in his pocket, which in those days was a hell of a lot of money. So they let him in without a sponsor because he was rich. Like other immigrants, he settled in New York City, and he worked both as a paper hanger and a bookbinder. And you ask, well, why? What did you that? Well, it was explained to my father that in Russia, in order to apprentice as a bookbinder, you had to be a schmirrer first. You had to do painting and wallpaper. At any rate, he did that in New York, and after he became a U.S. citizen, he moved to Syracuse, where he worked again as a bookbinder and binding very large volumes for the library. And soon after that, he was able to open a small bindery of his own. He married my grandmother in Syracuse, and I don't have the year, and produced a family of 4 sons, of which my father was the oldest. He was the firstborn. Now, I'm sure that we have relatives who were born in a lot of exotic places, but I can tell you that my father was born on an Indian reservation. A place called Onondaga Hills, New York, which was then a suburb of Syracuse, and it probably still is a part of the city, I don't know. But at any rate, it's rather odd when you ask. I asked to see his birth certificate, because I didn't believe it, but that's what it says on it. So, 3 more brothers followed. And then my grandfather evidently was a pretty far-sighted thinker. He was offered a job at the Wilson H. Lee Company in New Haven. I'm sure those of us here are probably not heard of it, but they were printers of the Scientific American magazine, which was a staple when I was growing up, and I imagine some of the older folks here probably know of it. And he accepted the job not because it paid him, but he wanted to get the best possible education for his sons. And it worked because my father and brother number 2, my Uncle Bernie, did attend Yale and graduated as engineers. But I must say, as an aside, Yale then was not the same as Yale today. They were Jews. They went to school like everybody else. They participated in extracurricular activities, but they lived at home. There was no place for them on campus in those years. Well, my grandfather opened his own bindery, which was called the M.H. Davidson Company. And after graduation from Yale in 1922, my father held a few jobs. One was at the paper company in Massachusetts, which makes currency paper. And the other was at the U.S. Patent Office, where any of you here are in the stationery business or know anything about paper, the Patent Office produced a list of specs so that rag bond paper, if you ever run across it anymore, and you probably won't, but rag bond paper is 25% rag, 50% rag, or 100% rag. Well, he drew up those specs, and as of 1970, when my father wrote these, 1980, when my father wrote these notes, that was still the spec. So, at any rate, during the Depression, my father joined his father, my grandfather, at the M.H. Davidson Company. And by that time, they had become a printing company as well as a bindery. And they also had a sideline of selling used printing machines and equipment. In 1930, there was news of a printing equipment for sale in Hartford. So my father, not like we do today, didn't hop in the car and go to Hartford. He went down to the train station, took a train to Hartford, and walked to 172 Pearl Street, which wasn't very far, but that's how they did it those days. In that building were Ace Printery, Sam Flaxman, Henry Joseph Printers, Joseph Merritt, Hartford engraver, and Louis Sheketoff of American Coal. Somebody, Howard asked if we knew the next generation, but Louis was then with American Coal in our building on the ground floor. My father, he also was a forward thinker, and although the Pine Printery, which is the operation you went to see, was not in business, and nobody knows what happened to Mr. Pine because my father did not have it in his notes. I don't know where he got his information from, as a matter of fact. At any rate, my father went back to my grandfather and he said, I think I can make an operating business out of this. Everything was in place just as if someone had walked and left the key and never came back. So he said to his grandfather he wanted to buy the whole shebang. My grandfather said, sure. So that is how Pine Davidson Company started. And that was right in the heart of the Depression, obviously. And that's also, as an aside, that's also how I started in 1930. Now, so much for ancient history. In 1955 or 56, there was a disagreement with the building's owner at 172 Pearl Street, which was Hartford Fire Insurance. My father needed various improvements. It was very difficult. There was no passenger elevator, and the freight elevator was very good at stopping between floors, but it was never stopped in the right place. So the Hartford Fire refused to do anything about it. I think they knew that City Place was going to be there, and they weren't going to put any more money in it. So they never told him that. As a matter of fact, they told him, if you don't like it here, you can move. So that's what my father decided to do, and the first thing he did is contact Joe Kane, who was a very well-known Jewish architect in town, who drew up plans for a new building in the North Meadows. Why the North Meadows? During the war, my father and several other Jewish men, led by Dr. Morris Cohn, formed an investment group and bought a big chunk of the North Meadows. So he just he got a family price, obviously, from his own group, and established the property on the North Meadows. Now, when it was time to build, they went out and contacted various contractors, and the low bid was from Dave Chase. Now, he was hired, but he was fired. Because he was, believe this or not, he was unable to achieve contact with a bank that allowed him to have a construction loan. No construction loan, no job. So therefore, the firm of Winnick and Perlman was hired, then another Jewish construction firm, and they're the ones who built the building. But I might mention that all is not, we don't need to feel sorry for Dave Chase, as you know, but about a year after that, there was a place called Tops Plaza. How many remember that on North Main Street? That was Dave's first project, and he took off from there. It was, I guess we were about a year or two soon. So during my lifetime, we're going to talk a little bit about equipment now. During my lifetime, commercial printers operated letterpress equipment. That's printing from movable type, either linotype, monotype, or hand display type. In 1941, my dad commuted during the summer to Manhattan to study offset lithography. And actually, lithography is really not a good name, because it's, to those of us who are artists, and I'm not one, a lithograph is made out of stone. But they did call it offset lithography, and they do to this day call it that. This process prints from a smooth plate, which has an image burned into a photographic emulsion. It's like a piece of film. Only in order to burn it, we call it burning the plates, was in front of a very, very high voltage light. Now the plate comes out with a positive image. You can read it, just like this piece of paper. And it's then hung on a press, and two rollers are attached to it, or are attached to the press. And one of them rolls over the image, the photographic image, and sticks. Now, if the plate were dry, it would stick to the whole plate. But there's another roller that has water on it. So if you got the right balance between water and ink, we get the image with ink on it, and the rest of the plate blank. Now, the reason it's called offset is, at that point, we have the image on the plate, but remember I said it was positive reading. Well, when you have type, it's negative reading. And so what happens is, the image is transferred to a blanket, which is basically rubber. Today it's all kinds of chemistry, but basically it's a rubber blanket. And from there, it's then printed on the paper. So there's no direct wear and tear on the plate, as there is with letterpress printing, which is made from lead and eventually wears out. The photo offset process still is used today. However, plates now come pre-sensitized. In the old days, we had to burn the emulsion onto the plate. It's a big process, and as a matter of fact, I have a scar on my hand from burning myself on the plate burner. Now, when you have this plate, as I explained, there was a photographic promotion, but now it's put on by computer pixels. And I don't know how they get so damn many pixels in the same place so fast, but that's how it works today. And all these pixels, it's computer generated. It goes directly from the computer to another computer that runs a plate setter, and voila, in a matter of a minute or two, you have a plate. Now, new printing processes they're coming on board all the time. But the most common one, we've already talked about letterpress and photo offset. Now let's talk about digital, because digital is a buzzword today. Although the process begins just like photo offset. There are no plates involved, zip, none. And the pixels are applied, instead of onto a plate, electrostatically to the paper being printed, and the inks are heat set. So if you rub your hand over a piece of digital printing, it's dry, which is not the same as the way letterpress is or offset is run. Now that you know how we do it, let me tell you what we print. Our smaller size jobs, business cards, short run forms, letterheads, they're usually run digitally. However, 98% really of our work is, well, large sheet. Direct mail, 4-color view books, perfect bound books, maps, catalogs, whatever. And it's printed offset on a large sheet. Our biggest customers are universities and colleges, nonprofit organizations, professional societies, senior living institutions, and everybody else that needs high-quality work delivered on time at a fair price. Our offset work is produced on 2 Heidelberg 5-color 40-inch presses, one of which is Perfector, which means that it prints on both sides of the paper in one pass through the press. Well, there's no secret that many printers are disappearing from the scene. We're not a healthy industry. Those of us who are left are competing for the work that hasn't gone away because of the internet, quick printers, or shrinking budgets. Well, that pretty much tells it like it is. I just would like to introduce my son, who's sitting right over here, and he is the heir apparent. He joined me after 5 years of military service as an Army Green Beret back in 1985, and he'll be taking over completely when I decide to retire or get carried out feet first. I want to thank the Historical Society for asking me to do this. As most of you know, and if you don't, you do now, because I'm going to tell you that a lot of the books that are printed by the Historical Society came from the Pine-Davidson Company. And we're I should give a nod to Howard, too, because we do a lot of work for the Federation as well. I'll just go over this. This is a corner, who knows where this is? This is a corner of Trumbull Street and Pearl Street.
Use the microphone.
Oh, this is a corner, doesn't work.
It will.
It will?
Make sure.
Okay, for those of you who know Hartford well, but nobody knows well enough to where this is. Know where this is. This is Trumbull Street, this is Pearl Street. This building here was torn down, obviously, to make City Place. The very next building right here, and unfortunately, I guess when it scanned, it wasn't very sharp. But right here on the first floor was, I mentioned, Automatic Comfort with it was American Coal then with Louis Sheketoff, and we were on the 4th floor and had a dark room and plate making on the 5th floor. Sam Flaxman was on the 3rd floor, yada yada. I don't want to go through the whole thing again. Okay, next. Okay, I mentioned that the M.H. Davidson Company was in New Haven and the Pine-Davidson Company was in Hartford. Even though there were 2 separate businesses, they liked to party together. So this is a Christmas party in 1930 or 31, I forgot, I had it written on the back, but I can't see the back. At any rate, this fellow up here, he's my father. This is number 3 brother. Number 2 brother did not go into printing. And of course, my father went into printing. And number 4 brother, I think it was a mistake, he was much younger than the rest of them. And he, believe this or don't, he became a car dealer. He sold Ramblers, and he was known as the old philosopher, and he had a piece in the paper every day where he philosophized on something or other. But he's long gone now. Next. Oh, that's my father. That's my father right there. And yeah, one of those things with the red thing on with a pointer on it. No. All right. Okay. These are two of our older employees, because this is a letterpress right behind us, and that's called a Mealy Vertical, and the printed from raised type because we, as I said in the beginning, we were a letterpress shop until 1941. Next. Okay. I don't need to show all of these. That's the only reason I'm here. Okay. Camera. We don't have it anymore. You don't use it anymore. There's me with a hat on. Go. He's doing playmaker. Go. I don't know why these were all scanned by, I don't know where you got them from. Next. I don't think there's anything. Oh, this is something significant. That's me. That's very significant. But also, I don't know how many of you enjoyed employment at one time or another from Beatrice Fox Auerbach. But we printed the house organ for G. Fox and Company. It was called The Go-Getter. And that's a picture of me reading it, and I thought, that's a pretty good picture of me, and I wanted to, that's another Jewish organization we had something to do with. We were a little smaller, however. Next. Okay, I mentioned, this thing's not focused. Can you focus it on?
I don't know. It's something with how the projector is.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is how we got our start in the Rough Meadows. And next. That's what it looks like now. Well, it doesn't even look like that now because all the shrubbery hasn't been planted yet. But that's a building at 237 Weston Street. Next. Oh, those two guys. I just introduced one of them over here, and I'm the other one here. At that time, we both had hair, or I had half hair. He doesn't have very much, and I don't have any. Next. That was in 1985, by the way. This is a bindery machine. Now, that's something that hasn't changed. We still fold paper. The machines look more modern, but they do the same thing. Next. That's a Swedish press that we had and a long time employee. Next. That's a folding machine. That's a typesetter. We don't do typesetting anymore because when people come to us with jobs, they've already set it on their own computer. And they bring us a disk. It's all set, ready to go. Well, not ready to go. Then we have to put it in proper position and maybe tweak the photos and things like that. But we don't do typesetting, other than a few, if we have to do some corrections, we do that. Go.
I think that was the last one.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed this, and I want to thank yourself for second or third on the list, however I was, I don't know. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is fantastic. And our last speaker is Mike Wolf, if you want to use this, from Bloomfield Bicycle Shop. And then we'll have questions afterwards. So thank you again, Hal. Can't use both at the same time.
Oh, well, all right, then I'll take this one home. Good evening, everybody. I am Mike Wolf, the owner of the Bloomfield Bicycle and Repair Shop, which is the largest and oldest bike shop in all of Connecticut. And not only is it the oldest and largest bike shop, but it is the best looking owner and the most charming and debonair of all bike shop owners in the state, which all of you, I'm sure, could pick it up right away by just seeing who is in front of you. About 2 months ago, Dave Diamond walked into the shop and approached me as a member of the Historical Society and asked if I would like to be a guest speaker at this affair or this program. And due to the fact that, as you can notice, that I like to talk, I I immediately said, sure. But then I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And he said, well, we'd like to have you talk about your business. Well, that opened a whole new ballgame. My business, that's truthfully my life, and I said, certainly, I would do that, but what are some of the topics? And he rattled off some suggestions, which was the first one to be talking about the start of the business, how it started, the principles, the location, and so on and so forth. We said yes, and here I am. I'm going to apologize because, well, I don't really have to apologize because my other two speakers had notes, but I was going to apologize for using notes because at my age, which is 78 now, I'm finding it very difficult to remember. In fact, my memory is, excuse the expression, shit. I can't remember anything without writing it down. Sure. When I do want it back later on, I'm going to sell it. So, we'll start off with the history of the Bloomfield Bike Shop. But prior to the history of the bicycle shop, I have to go back a little bit before we even moved to Connecticut. And it actually started in the 40s. My parents, or the whole family, lived in, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, it's a little community called Brooklyn, New York. And we lived there, the whole family. The family consisted, of course, my mom and dad, and my older brother, David, who was my protector, as well as his job was to take care of his little brother because his little brother was constantly getting into trouble. And then we had my kid sister, Paulette, who was the princess of all princesses, and of course my parents put everything on, she could do no wrong. And then, well, me, which my parents would use the expression sometimes, well, he's the troubled son, the one that causes problems, more or less the problem sons. In fact, many times I remember that when the question came up that who is this young, little chubby fat kid that would run around and be a nuisance, my parents would sometimes not even admit to it. They were not crazy about that. Anyway, at that time, my dad was approached by a friend of his to become a partner in a business that he was going to be opening in Hartford, Connecticut. And after a while, my parents decided that, hey, this might be a good opportunity, and they sold their house, packed us up, and off we went to Connecticut. And while we were in Connecticut, or when we first got here, my parents rented a building, actually a place to live. They rented a farm, well, we had moved into a farm community, and they had barns and the whole works in this little, this house. It wasn't a little house. And that's where we lived. And it was a town that had approximately, a small town, 18,000 people, with a population, a Jewish population of probably less than 1%. And the town was Bloomfield. Of course, now the town has grown to where there was no synagogues in Bloomfield at that time. There are now 3, and heavens knows that there are many, many, many Jews in the town of Bloomfield. Anyway, my dad worked in this business, the partnership, and it was working out fairly well, but there was an old saying that I remember hearing, that if you want to have a good business or profitable business, or better still, a successful business, you don't go into business with friends. And to that point, my dad and his friend that took him into the partnership, after a year or so, it broke up, as well as their friendship. Well, Dad was not one to sit around moping. He immediately went out and got a job. And the job was a very interesting job, very difficult job in those days. He worked for Ace Vacuum Cleaners. And Ace Vacuum Cleaners put him on the road as a door-to-door salesman. Okay, my dad would take any job because he was that type of guy. Didn't bother him, and he did a good job. And his territory was the immediate world. He would travel all throughout Connecticut, and on his trips through different towns, he would run into especially on the garbage days, he would see bicycles being thrown out, broken bicycles. Or in some cases, people just cleaning up their attics, their garages, or their barns, or whatever it was, and they would throw them out. My dad would stop by, get permission from the people that were throwing it out to see if he can take these bikes. And of course they said, sure, they were throwing it out anyway. And he would bring them home, and at that point, start working on them. He brought my brother and myself into the barn where he worked, and he taught us the art of repairs and fixing up these bicycles. And of course, we fixed them up and cleaned them up, had them all spiffy, and we put them out in the front of the house with signs for sale, and the prices range from a high of $10, $12 to a low of $3, and that was the range that he would sell. Surprisingly, it turned out to be a good supplement to my father's income, because he wound up selling a lot of these bicycles, and everything was going smooth. I mean, he had a job as a salesman and a job as a bicycle mechanic and retailer. Everything was great until one day we get notice from the Bloomfield Zoning Board. And they said, got a nice business here, but unfortunately you're zoned for residential. And residential, you're not allowed to sell and have a business. So we had to make a decision, or my dad had to make a decision. What is he going to do? Is he going to stay with the vacuum cleaner job, or open his own little shop? And there was no really thinking about it. He said, we're out of here with the insurance, with the vacuum cleaners. And we immediately, he gave notice to the, I don't know if he gave notice or just gave him back the vacuum cleaners and left. But he started looking around in Bloomfield, and which wasn't too difficult, because on Mountain Avenue in Bloomfield, there was an old wooden building that at one time was a hardware store. And again, being in a farming community, they would be selling a lot of the farm equipment, and that's where they sold it, from this building. At the time that we found it, it had, the landlord had subdivided it to having 3 or 4 other stores in this big building. And there was one empty, which my father at that time negotiated and took over the empty store. The rent for this store was, and I know you're gonna say it was an awful lot of money at that time, but he paid $70 a month rent. Now, I don't want you to feel that we really got taken, because my dad was a great negotiator, and he had the landlord include all the utilities and the property taxes. All of this for $70 a month. My dad had worked in the shop to start it, and being a Jewish traditional man, my dad felt that as long as my brother and I were bar mitzvahed, we now are, according to our tradition, we are men. I didn't know the world was round, and now I'm a man going to work in the business. So here we are in the business, and we worked. And my dad was not shy about making us work our tushes off. And we hustled, and we worked, and we had to do everything. That was before school. We would go, and because the shop was, oh, there's the shop. What a nice store. Every morning, that was the whole extent of our store originally, and it was so small that the bikes had to be stood up on the end, on the back wheel, and stack them. Otherwise, you could not physically get all the bikes that we had in there because of the size of the store. So every morning, David and I would have to, by the way, my brother is here today just to check and make sure I don't screw up, because he's used to taking care of me all our lives. So anyway, we would come every morning, and that's what we did. Rain, snow, sleet, it didn't make any difference. We were putting the bikes out, and that's what we had to do. And then we would go to school, and at 2:15, we were supposed to come immediately from school and start working, doing the repairs or whatever else my dad had in store for me. My brother always was there at 2:15. I, unfortunately, had detention from the day I started to the day that I finished, and I never got there until 3:30. So that's what we started with. And in this work situation, my dad instilled on both of us a work ethic that he lived by it, and we were taught, and he would tell us, and I have his words that, if I could find it, it was someplace in this. He would say, anything, hold it 1 second, and wait. Well, I'll just tell you, he would say, anything in life that you want, you have to work for it. There's no free ride, no free lunch. The only way you're going to get ahead is to work and put your whole self into it. Also, he never believed in time clocks. He said if there was a job to do, you stayed until that job was finished. And this is what we were taught. It was a good work ethic. It still follows me even today. At 78 years of age, I work 7 days a week. I put in 70+ hours a week at the shop. That's of course in season. In the off season, I play a lot, but the fact is, this is how we were brought up, and we taught by my dad, who had this work ethic that was truthfully the best thing that ever happened to us. Fast forward a little bit, my brother, when he graduated high school, decided that he wanted to try something a little different, and he decided to go into the Air Force, which happened to be our side. And he left my dad and myself as the two people to run the business. My brother, between you and I, and he's sitting over there, he really didn't like the business. He didn't like getting his hands dirty. But he did do when he was told, and he worked. But he's found the Air Force was his way of getting out of the business. Meanwhile, my dad and I worked the business for another 5, 6, 8 years, and he decided it was time for him to retire. So he left for Florida and left one man standing, me. Now, being a young whippersnapper of all of probably 27, 28, we decided, where's my notes here? Here it is. See, I tell you, not only can I read and hear and see, it's really getting tough being old. By the way, folks, let me tell you a little bit of information. Don't get old, it sucks. Okay, so...
The alternative is worse.
That's true. But meanwhile, so here I am. We moved, my dad moves, David's away from the business, and I'm there. And at 27, 28, man, I'm thinking, my goodness, young guy like me, I could do anything. Big marker, you know. And I said, here I have this one store that I first started in. And by the way, I will tell you one thing which I forgot. As the people that were in this first store that we had, the 3 or 4 other people that were subdivided in that store, as they went out of business or retired, we took over, and ultimately that whole building on Mountain Avenue was the bike shop. And this was where I felt look, if I could expand into this massive big bike shop at the time, and that was also a very big shop for bike shops, because traditionally bike shops were very small and very, as that our first store was. And anyway, getting back to being the big marker and figuring if I have this one successful store, why not open more stores? Smart, why should I have one headache when I could have a multitude of headaches, you know? So I started saying, okay, I'm gonna open stores. And I opened up a store in Simsbury. I opened a store in Windsor. I opened a store in Newington, then Wethersfield, Farmington, Berlin, Southington, and Glastonbury. 9 freaking headaches. But you know something? Again, I was very fortunate. I had a father that had a lot of business sense. And one of the things that he taught me or told me about employees is if you give them some reason to be there, like a part of the business, give them some interest in the business. So that's what I did. And each one of the managers, I gave them a small piece and the opportunity, if there was profit, which there was, by the way, every one of the 9 stores, now I'm bragging, was a success. I never had one store that went out of business. I never had one store that was not profitable. And the reason they weren't, I firmly believe, is that the managers worked it as their own, which, as you all know, if you have a piece of something, you're more apt to put your whole heart and soul in it. And again, they would have the opportunity as the years went by, they can in turn buy a little bit more and more. Anyway, my dad, of course, I would keep him informed about what I was doing and opening up the different stores. And being in Florida, his one thing was to go out and brag to all the people sitting around the pool, and he would, and this my mother would tell me, yeah, your father was out bragging about you. And he would go and he would say, yeah, my big shot son with the chain of bicycle shops in Connecticut. By the way, it was my doing. I told him what to do, which in fact he did, but he didn't expect it that fast. Anyway, we had, as I said, the success of these 9 stores, and every one of them have been still up until the time of, oh, I'm getting the high sign that I better get moving. Yeah. Okay, we'll just move on. One of the other parts that we were supposed to talk about was something about the trials and tribulations about being a Jewish businessman. And I'm talking faster because I got a little bit more here. I want to get it all in. That's my dad in the middle. I'm over to the left, and David is to the right. And God, were we good looking. Anyway, the trials and tribulations about being a Jewish businessman. And I'm going to share a couple of stories. One was about an anti-Semitic story and it was only one in all the years of being in business that I ever ran into something like that. And the story was that there was a bicycle shop in Simsbury, and for whatever reason, this owner of this bicycle shop would badmouth the Bloomfield Bike, would badmouth the owner of the shop, and when he would finish talking to whoever he was talking to, he would also say, and by the way, he's a Jew. And it got back to me because one particular incident, the couple that he was talking to, the wife was Jewish, the guy was an Italian, and of course the Italian name, so he figured he was safe. And she passed on that one story about this anti-Semitic. Well, I was so upset in the way he talked about me, I immediately opened up a store in Simsbury. And to that fact, I poured all my energies to be the best. And within 2.5 years later, gone. Gone. That was the only anti-Semitic story or anything remotely. Otherwise, Bloomfield was very good to us and was very non-trouble. And now I'm going to share a couple cute stories. First of all, one of the things, I'm talking fast as I can. Okay, one of the things that we did, which was pretty novel, we were the only people in Bloomfield that sold Christmas trees. Think about it. Jewish family selling Christmas trees. People would come up to me as they're buying, and they would ask questions about the pine versus the spruce. I didn't know pine from a spruce to a tree. But we mumbled along, and we said, "Yeah, this is the best one," and we sold the trees. And we had a great business until the Lions, Civitans, or whatever club took over for selling the trees, and we gave it up. One of the other stories, also around Christmas time, and this was a real funny thing. Christmas Eve, I send all my employees home, and I stay to close up the store. They go about 12 o'clock. They're all Gentiles that wanted to go home early, and I let them home. and we're ready to close up after staying there, and a woman comes in, running into the store, and she says, "Oh, I am so glad you're here because I have to get a bike for my nephew, and you're the only one open. I went to 3 other bike shops and nobody was open." Boom, boom, boom. She comes in and I say, "Sure, we'll sell you the bike," and we sell her the bike, and her husband goes out to bring the car around and to load it up, and she says to me, "By the way, why are you here so late?" And I said, "Well, to be perfectly honest, this isn't our holiday. I'm Jewish, and we don't celebrate Christmas." And she looks at me and she says, "Well, what do Jews do on Christmas?" Now, you have to understand, this is a woman that looks fairly intelligent and whatnot. And I say to her, and I think, maybe she's pulling my leg. So I say, "Well, I don't know what the other Jewish businessmen do, but I know that I go home and I sit with my family around the fireplace and we count all the money that we made at Christmas." And just then her husband comes walking down the stairs and he says, she says to him, "Hey Bob, do you know what Jewish people do at Christmas Eve?" Anyway, that was the other story. And can I talk? Okay. All right. One other thing that...
Last story.
What?
Last story.
Last story? Oh, you're missing so much. You'll be sorry okay. My dad, very frugal, because he had to be growing up, and he came from real tough beginnings. And everything that he would do was practical or a way to save money. For example, signage in a store, he would, if we had to put a sign on sale, he would take a piece of bicycle cardboard and rip it up and use crayon. It's for sale, cheap or price. He would never spend the money for a professional sign, except for this one time that my dad, being a very proud Jew, he decided to go out and spend money on a professional sign for the holidays. And it read, "Closed for our Jewish holidays." And he put this window, the size of this picture here, in the window. I mean, 2.5 miles away, driving, you could see that sign. And of course, he was very proud of the fact that it was, that he was Jewish. And now I have to shut up because, thanks very much. I enjoyed
We are going to have a chance to ask some questions. So I also want to do the raffle. I want to thank again everybody. Michael, thanks for your wonderful stories as well. And we have a chance to hear a few more when we answer some questions.
Okay, sure.
Okay. I'd like to invite Gary Schwartz up here, our president. Gary, if you could come up here. Gary, if you could come up here. We're going to draw the raffle. If everybody welcome our president, Gary Schwartz of the Jewish Historical Society. Estelle, one.
23 bicycles? No, it's 23 bike rides around Bloomfield.
First one. Is there 2, Estelle? 2. Hang on. First one is Josh Asia. Well, come on up, stay right there. Actually, talk to Estelle before you leave. And thanks for coming, Josh.
What's the prize?
And second is, if I say this right, Roz Racklin.
Oh my God!
So, we're about to...
I just want to say one thing. We have our president of the Federation here, and I want to acknowledge him, but I want to just say one thing that's very important. You know, it was wonderful that all you guys came out tonight to support these business owners. They and so many others here that supported them, like David Rosenthal's dad and and Mark Seltzer with the Crown, and all of you, you have built what was this community, is this community, your philanthropy, support for synagogues, Hebrew Healthcare, which is now Hebrew Senior Care, your support for the JCC. That is really what we're celebrating, and we really are here to honor you, and I'm tired of hearing stories when people have passed. I think it's so important that all of you share stories for you and your families, what you've accomplished. And all of you that run businesses, you know how hard it is and how many challenges, and you should feel proud, and your families should really feel proud of what you've accomplished, putting them through schools, helping them get started. So I want to applaud you and everyone else that showed up.
Thank you, Gary. And we want to invite our panelists to come up to the panel. So Howard and Terry and Mike, if you guys can join us up front. And this is Mary Donahue, who will have the microphone that will walk around. So make sure you tell us your name before you ask your question. And we'll have a few minutes for questions. We know that other people want to chit-chat as well. And again, remember, if you have a family business, come talk to us afterwards so we can try to schedule another wonderful event like this. So Mary will come around if you guys have questions. And come and join us at the panel over here. We're going to sit down. Sit down, Sam. Yeah.
This is my chance to be Oprah. Come on now. Okay, Oprah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Richard Warner, and I have a question for Howard. Can you see me, Howard? Yeah, there you go.
Stand up. Stand up.
Yeah, sit down for me. Okay, Howard, so I noticed in all those pictures of the various trucks and stuff, a lot of interesting designs. Did your father help design those trucks, or was it already set as to what he had to paint on the side of the truck?
It's an interesting question. Yes, we did design work, and if you noticed some of the later ones, like Laurel Beef, we had huge fights with them trying to say, you're selling Laurel Beef. You're not selling beef, you're selling Laurel Beef. Make the Laurel bigger. The best story happened to me, and I got a visit one day from Jaime Paley, who owned Paley Hay Company in Portland. And Jaime said, I have about 15 trucks that I want to paint, and when can you paint them? I said, well, what are you painting? He said, well, this one's white, and this one's red, and this one's orange. And I said, well, Jaime, you really need to have a brand, and I was fresh out of some classes in business school. You need a brand, you need to sell. He thought about it, he says, no, that doesn't work. He says, we don't have any paperwork at our business. And when people call up for a bale of hay, we say, what color truck delivered to you last time? But yes, we did do some design work as well.
This question is from Michael Wolf.
Give him your name too.
Art Nassau. You will remember, Mr. Wolf, in the 1960s when I was the attorney for the redevelopment agency in Bloomfield. And that little schmata store that was worth nothing, we ended up spending a fortune to move you.
$36,240.
Those count.
And I will tell you where a Jewish cup came into play at that particular time. For those that don't know what the redevelopment committee was, I don't think they're still around, but they would come into an area and take over buildings that were dilapidated or needed a lot of work. And they would pay you to move your where you were to a new location. I went to the library and spent many, many days and nights reading about the rules and regulations, and I learned the, if you will call it, the tricks of redevelopment. For example, they would have to move the box. You would put your items in a box, you would put it on a truck, and you drive it over. But they never said that you had to put a certain amount of stuff in the truck. They never said that you have to make a truckload to move. So I took one box and I put one spoke in it, sealed it, and by the way, they paid you by the hour to seal, box, and everything. I put that in, I picked up the box, and I put the box, oh no, they all knew about this. I took the box, we drove the one box over, put it in the new store, which was only about 2 miles away. I would open up the box, take out, and by the way, there was after a while, they were catching on. They were spending so much money. In fact, at that time, I was the largest amount of money that the redevelopment ever spent to move a small business like this.
I just want to say that $36,000 was not for the building. That was for your tool, your little screws.
Each one, they paid me by the hour, and it was very good.
Hard to top that one, but Michael.
Yeah, I'm Michael Fishman, actually on the board of the Historical Society, and just wanted to say it's great to hear all your stories. I'm glad we can document them forever and ever. You all talked about your fathers. I think that was wonderful. And Harry, we kind of know what the continuum is, but for the other two businesses, is there, Howard and Mike, a next generation, and you know, will it go on forever?
In my case, yes, my daughter married a gentleman that came into the business, and he has the work ethic that I talked about, and he ultimately will take over the business from me. Not only was he extremely smart, because he was smart enough to pick my daughter to marry, and consequently he's going to wind up with a very large business. Howard.
My kids, as of yet, have no desire. We're going to Los Angeles tomorrow to meet Stephanie's boyfriend. Even though he's in rabbinic school, I still have a chance.
Since nobody asked me a question, I want to ask Howard a question. We have a company truck. It is not painted, but it has a huge broadside on it, which is made by a computer on plastic and then shrink wrapped around the truck. Is this something you have to get into in order to compete today?
We actually got out of the, back in the late 70s, we got out of the truck painting business completely.
Oh, okay. Smart.
And just went into the retail auto body business.
Just doctors of auto body repair, yes.
Harry, I wanted to ask you a question. With the move you guys made from Pearl Street to Weston Street, what was that like? What was that experience like to go from downtown to going to the Meadows?
Well, as I said earlier, the land that we were on was owned by a group that my father was a part of. So going down there was a no-brainer. Now, when we went down there was nothing down there. I used to take my kids to the drive-in movie with my son Dan, would put them in the car and take them to the drive-in movie down there because there was no civilization there. Actually, we were the second building on the street. Hot Soda was there. They're long gone. And at any rate, the rest of the buildings weren't even built. Oscar Spitzer came in and back, but they left. So what was it like? Well, the good part was we had a loading dock, which we didn't have on Pearl Street. We had a place to park, which we didn't have on Pearl Street. So it was a kayak, we loved it. Even after they put the jail down there, it's still good.
Well, we want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I'd like to thank Beth Ellis. I'd like to thank David Diamond, who really did a lot of the work to put this whole thing together, and Steve Robbins Men's Club, and Estelle and Gary, our participants, our audience. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.